Hi everyone, it's book club night. One of my favorite nights of the month where me and all my close friends come together and we discuss a book of our choosing, of my choosing, a book that I suggest. And I'm so excited tonight because we are going to be talking about this book, All the Lonely People by Mike Gayle. And author Mike Gayle is going to be joining us. We're going to have an incredible conversation. And guys, this is going to be so much fun. Okay, so a little bit of backstory. Last month, I don't know why, but I was having trouble choosing a book club book. And everything that I read, I was like, oh man, I don't know if it would be good because of this or because of that. And then I had one book and I tried to get the author and that author couldn't make it on. And so it was kind of down to the wire. And my friend Stephanie Van Alman posted on her Instagram several books that she had read, and she always rates them. And she had read this book, All the Lonely People, and gave it like tons of stars. And Stephanie is a long-term member of our book club. And I was like, I'm going to give that one a try. And I am so excited because we get to talk with Mike tonight. I loved this story. I hope you did too. I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. I can't wait to talk to Mike about it. Guys, we got to talk about this book. Now, first of all, if you're new to the book club, and you need to know that we do spoilers on this book club. The whole point of a book club is to talk about the book that you have read with your friends who have also read the book. So if you're just joining us, I highly recommend this book. We're going to talk with Mike tonight, All the Lonely People. But I just want to tell you, if you think you might read it, you might want to like hop off and then come back, watch it. I'll post it on Instagram, the interview. I'll post it on YouTube. But you might want to read the book for yourself and then come back and watch the interview because this is a really, really special book. It's all about friendship and connection and loneliness. And those of you who know, at the Holly Furtick Book Club, we love books where I'm always trying to hone in, what is it exactly that we love in this book club? And I think what it is that we love is books that just give you a character that you want to know, that you love, that you cheer for, that you are rallying for. And so that's one. Two, which we have in Hubert. I was trying to think, is Hubert one of my favorite book club characters that we've ever done? Maybe so. I think he would be up there in my top 5. I loved Hubert and I wanted to meet him. I wanted to hug him. Did anybody else love Hubert? So somebody says, doing life with purpose. My first book club, I read the book. I'm so ready and excited for this interview. It's going to be so great because Hubert was such an amazing character. Guys, he was amazing. So in our book club, we love amazing, strong characters. We also love friendship. We also love people who overcome something. And we love books that have good endings, but not necessarily perfect endings. And that was one of the things that I loved about this book, was that it ended great. And we're going to talk about the ending at the end. We're going to talk about the ending at the end. Imagine that. But I love a book that makes me laugh, makes me cry, surprises me. And I found all of that in this book. And also, one of my favorite things to find in a book is something that makes me feel empathy. I love a book that makes me think and makes me feel and makes me go out into the world and look people in the eyes and think about their situations. And that's what Mike does with this book. So before we get Mike on, I want to know, let's just recap. Okay, so we have Hubert, and he is an elderly gentleman. He's in his 80s. He moved to Great Britain in the 1950s. And he moved from the West Indies to be a part of the workforce in Great Britain. And so he's an African American, And so we have all these themes of, we have themes of race, we have themes of hardship, we have themes of love, we have themes of prejudice, loneliness, immigrants, biracial marriage. I mean, this book, like, what's so great is when a story, a fiction story, is able to cover topics that really make you think. Just such a great story, so many great characters. Let's see, what else do I have? Okay, I actually, you know, every month I print out a favorite quote from the book, and I always forget, or like 9 times out of 10, I think I forget to read the quote. And tonight I'm going to read the quote because I really love this. Here we go. It's a little bit long, and I posted it on my Instagram. So maybe you guys saw that. Okay, here we go. It says, Hubert did not want to go into this room. He was scared and he felt vulnerable, and the last thing on earth he wanted was to try and make friends with these strangers. He wished with all his heart that Joyce were here with him. After all, it was always easier to meet new people if there were 2 of you. It gave you confidence and made you feel at ease. Look, it said to the world, I already have one friend, so I can't be all that bad. And Joyce always made him feel like his best self anyway, so there would be no resisting him. I guess that's not really a quote, maybe that's more like a passage, but I love that. And I love how we have this setup, we have this man, he's obviously very lonely. He has this conversation with his daughter, and she says she's coming, and so he wants to prove that he's been out in the world and that he hasn't been, you know, like a hermit in his home. And so he tries to go out and meet people, and he just feels so awkward. And I love that scene in the book because you could feel it. Like, we've all been in a place where you walked into a room and you felt like, gosh, I wish I had one person with me. And it's so amazing how one person can give you so much more confidence when you walk into a room. And so I love the way that Mike created this character and immediately made you feel connected to him. I feel like it's time to bring Mike on. Are we ready? Let's do it.
Hello.
Hi, Mike.
It's so lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, it is so great to meet you. First of all, I forgot to introduce everybody to you and tell them that you are in England.
Yes, I am. It is 1:30 in the morning here, or
oh my goodness. Okay, so I just have to make sure that I say thank you so much for doing
pleasure.
This. It's always so much fun to get to chat with an author, and that you would stay up till 1:30 in the morning to chat with us is like, it's really, really such an honor. And I'm so happy that you would do that.
I'm just delighted. I'm just delighted to be in I feel like I'm in a room. I feel like I'm in a room with all of these people, and just listening to you discuss the book is just everything that I wanted when I was doing this. It was just everything that I wanted, because just hearing all your reactions and hearing your favorite bits and even bits that you didn't like. This is an author's dream, you know. So yes, thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. We have a really fun little community here that we love books and we love to talk about them. And I found it's so, I was surprised at how many authors would come on. Sorry. I turned on a space heater and it's about 90 degrees outside, so I don't want that. It's just such a pleasure to talk with authors and get to hear how these characters come to life. And so I forgot to introduce you and tell everybody you live in England. And the most intriguing thing about you to me is that you were a journalist, and you were an advice columnist for a teen magazine. And I think that's amazing. And then you wrote your first book, and now you've written. So my sheet that my team put together says that you've written 12 books, but I also saw somewhere that you've written 17.
Yeah, it's definitely 17 books.
17 books.
Yes.
I mean, how do you push through and continue to give your all to your 17th book?
It's a strange one. I think this is just a job that I've always wanted to do, and so it feels like a complete privilege to be able to do it. And so every time I sit down, I want to tell a story that will really engage readers, that will really they'll take into their heart. And so, they might. What I love about my books is that there are people out there who say, one of my books is one of their all-time favorite books. And I just think that's such a privilege to think, of all the books in the world, somebody says, no, this one is my favorite, and they take it in their heart with them, and they've reread it and they can quote bits to me. It's just amazing.
So this particular book, you started writing in 2018. What compelled you? It's almost, to me, it's almost prophetic that you would, in 2018, write a book about loneliness that would come out. It was released in the last summer of 2020, when the whole world was dealing with loneliness. What compelled you in 2018 to say, I want to write a book about an elderly man who's lonely?
It's a strange thing, because we when the book came out here in the UK, it was just as the world was beginning to lock down, and we were thinking, well, so bookshops have been closed, and people were worried about how's it all going to work, and then we had a little bit of an online meeting, and then with the sales team, and we were all thinking, actually, this is a perfect book for right now, because it's got so many things that, it does feel sort of prophetic, even though I'm certainly not. You've not only got this thing about loneliness, but you've also got the thing about, race became very much a center stage issue. As well, and so it just, but you also had people experiencing loneliness who perhaps might not have experienced loneliness before. So, for instance, you don't think of many young people being lonely, but then suddenly everybody had to be in their own spaces, and so people who were away from their families or lived on their own suddenly, before they'd had their own social network, and then suddenly they just they couldn't physically even see their friends. So yes, it was a book for our times. The reason I wrote it was because I really wanted to write about loneliness. That was the thing that was at the forefront of my mind. This just this idea of loneliness, and I had an image of I always say to people, I had an image of a house, and a house with maybe one person who comes into it, and then it's joined by another, and that's Hubert and Joyce, and then they have their family, so there are two more people in the house. But then gradually that house empties one by one until you're just left with this one person. And I thought that was the image that was my head, and I wanted to show how somebody becomes lonely, because we see so many lonely people when we encounter people who are lonely. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of think, oh, they're lonely. I suppose what I wanted to show was, how did they become lonely? We're not born lonely. And that was really important to me. I just wanted to kind of, and because this was the first time in all my writing career that I've written about a character across a lifetime. And, you were talking a little bit earlier about, the tragedy, so much tragedy in Hewitt's life. And I think that's part and parcel, I think, of getting older. The very nature of getting older is that the longer we live, the more we've experienced, and sadly, the more people were likely to have lost. And so I suppose that was very much in my mind as well, just having this kind of, the image of the house, but also this image of someone leaving their country. So we've got the loneliness of the immigrants. Then we've got the sort of the hostility of racism. So you've got the loneliness of being an outsider. And then you've got, when he loses various people, you've got the loneliness it's experienced, so sharply because you're so used to being part of a team, and then suddenly it's just you. So there's all different sorts of loneliness. So of course, you've got Ashley's loneliness as well, and of course, all the different members of the committee, they've all got their own types of loneliness as well.
Yeah, and I actually really loved how you showed that everybody experiences loneliness through, and it was through so many different ages and stages of life. You had the single mom, you had the woman, you know, kind of in her 60s. You had the Emil, the immigrant, who was away from his family and sending money back to them, and in a country that wasn't his. And then obviously you have Hubert and his journey, and you kind of captured the loneliness at the beginning of his life and at the end of his life. And I just thought it was really beautiful, the way, like what you said about the pain that he experienced throughout his life, because that is part of life, is having these painful experiences, but also the people that you have with you along the way in those places. And yeah, I thought it was really well done. Was there what made you want to take this through the eyes of Hubert? Was there any personal connection to him?
When I was thinking about the story, I was thinking I wanted a protagonist, so I knew that I was going to be about this character, and I was going to look at him through a lifetime. And then I began to think about my sort of parents' generation, and so my parents were in their 80s, and the things that they'd experienced, but also friends and family friends and things like that. And so that's when I sort of got the idea. I wanted to talk about a first generation. They're the first generation of immigrants who kind of came from Jamaica, so basically invited by England. So we were part of the Commonwealth, and so it's post-war. England needed to be rebuilt, and they looked towards the colonies, and they said to the West Indies and other colonies, please come, we need you to be part of our workforce. And Hubert is part of that generation who comes, and my parents, they came in the 60s. And so I wanted to do that and bring this in. And I suppose I was thinking about people of my Hubert came in the 50s, so he came in the 50s, and my parents came a little bit later. But I wanted to talk about that generation because it was very much in the news as well, because there'd been a scandal here, actually in the UK, where people who had lived their lives here had suddenly weren't, and you know, for various reasons, they might have gone back to Jamaica for a little while, and then when they come back, they weren't allowed back in the country. So there's a really big scandal about that. And also it was in the news because you know, it was it was coming up to I think it was like 50 years since that kind of wave of, or there was a big anniversary of that wave of immigration. So that was very much at the forefront of my mind. And Hubert sort of came to me. He's a little bit like my dad in that he's quite dapper. My dad's quite dapper. My dad's very particular about clothes. He's very smartly dressed. But he's a little bit different as well, and you know, so he's a little bit of neighbours and various family members. So yeah, I just drew him together.
I thought it was such a unique time period of history. I love historical fiction. I love to learn about history through fiction. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I'm like, when you read a history book, it's written by someone. You don't know if it's all true or not. So why not read a story about it? That's sort of my philosophy. And so I really loved how you taught me about this period. You know, I've read so many World War II novels, but to take me just 10 years post-war and realize, oh, there was this era in history where Great Britain needed to be rebuilt. And what did they do? They invited the people from their colonies in. And what was that like to be one of those people that was brought in And I didn't know about that, the news story, 50 years later. But I loved how you brought that to light. And
Thank
through
you.
a character, though, that was just so, so, so lovable. So, okay. What I want to talk to you a little bit about your method. So you start with a character.
Yeah.
Did you know the ending before you started? Do you have an outline? How do you come through your story?
Yeah, I'm very much a planner. So
Okay.
I will plan out. I'll get a general beginning, middle, and end, and then I'll think to myself. Then I'll break it down into individual chapters. So I'll know what happens in each chapter as I go along. And one of the things that became apparent as I was thinking about the story was that it was definitely going to have two timelines. I wanted to have a then timeline that told the story of how Hubert became lonely. But I also wanted to have a storyline where we see Hubert do something, Hubert be brought out of his loneliness, and for him to become a kind of figurehead as well. And that's another strange story. So, occasionally I will read the occasional Amazon 1-star Amazon review, and I've seen people say, "Oh, they'll say it's not very realistic," and you go, "Oh, wow," and "Oh, that would never happen." And one of the interesting things, again, I'm not a prophet, but during lockdown, I don't know whether he got there, whether you know about him, but there's a man who's coming in the UK who's called Major Tom, and he was a major in the army, and he was 100 years old. And during lockdown, he decided to walk up and down his garden to raise money for charity. This caught on so much that he ended up raising £3 million for the NHS.
Wow.
And so it's just, it's an incredible story. But what I think is lovely about it is just that, it is real. People can make a difference. So often we think to ourselves, "Oh, I'm just one person," and he must have thought, "I'm a 100-year-old man. I'm living in a home. What can I do?" And he was probably maybe thinking, "I'm going to raise maybe 100, maybe 200 pounds."
Right.
He ended up raising £3 million for the NHS, and also had his biography published. So
Wow.
incredible things can happen, like Hubert says, but you've got to open yourself up to them.
I love it. That's actually, I actually underlined that. That's like one of the last lines in the book where he says, he says, "And that's the funny thing about life. Extraordinary things can happen to ordinary people like you and me, but only if we open ourselves up to let them." And that's sort of the whole gist of the story. Is it's an ordinary guy who ends up bringing a lot of people together in spite of his pain, in spite of his loss. And that's so cool. Okay, so everybody's asking. They really are. I'm not just saying that. They want to know, did you plan for Rose to be dead did you start out knowing that Rose was dead?
Yes, I did. Yes. It was one of the things that when I came up with the idea, I knew that I needed a reason for, because at the very beginning, we know, with the synopsis, and from the very first chapter that something happened to Hubert 5 years ago. And so at the very forefront of my mind, I needed to have, okay, why is this character lonely? And I thought about all sorts of different reasons. And then when the idea came to me, it's because his daughter's dead. It suddenly hit me as soon as I kind of felt it in my chest. And as soon as I felt it in my chest, I just thought, that's got to be it. And it's so horrible because when I was writing the chapter where Hubert reveals that his daughter's dead, it really shook me. It really shook me.
Oh.
I really felt for him in that moment. And despite the fact that he's a fictional character that I'm creating, I just thought, this is awful. But it's like also at the same time, it's such a perfect explanation of why he withdrew. And
Right.
and because of that, you know, the temptation sometimes is because, you know, when you love a character, you kind of want what's best for them. And so making horrible things happen to them isn't really what, you know, what you want to do naturally, but you've got to go through it because that's where the heart of the novel is. The heart of the novel is he's created this world where his daughter still exists because it's the only way he can carry on living.
Right.
And so, when he hears that telephone ring, and he talks about it, and he hears that telephone ring, and he picks up the phone, and he hears Rosie's voice. He knows in his heart that it can't be, but at the same time, he so wants it to be. And I've spoken to lots of people who have lost loved ones, and especially if you don't live in the same place, if you don't normally
Right.
see them, but you might speak to them on the phone.
Right.
It's so easy to think that they're just carrying on their lives, and all you need to do is pick up the phone and talk to them. So because they're not there, I suppose normally they're physically,
Right.
and so because Rose is always on the other side of the world, and he was so used to speaking to her on the phone, it's maybe easier for him to kind of swallow the lie that by keeping her alive at the end of the phone.
Yeah, and I have to be honest with you. I didn't really believe it for a while. I kept thinking, like, maybe she didn't die and he has been having phone conversations and she is coming home. Maybe he misunderstood, because I was in so much shock. But then it explained why he was in that situation, and it gave you that sort of, like, as a reader, it gave me that shock. I'm gonna be honest. At first, I didn't like it. I was like, "Why did he do that?"
Yes.
You, meaning you.
Yes.
Why did Mike make Rose dead the whole time? But then, by the time I finished it, I was like, you know what? I liked it. I didn't see it coming, and never read anything, that was quite like that. Because typically, when you read something like that, it's more of a suspense type book.
Yes.
So yeah, you won me over in the end, and I loved how he had to confess it to Jan to make it real, to actually say, like, yeah, this really, I know this is gonna sound crazy, and I think I'm so intrigued by the idea of friendship, and in my own personal life, of fighting for my own personal relationships, and I find that it's those types of moments where you actually really let someone into your life, that your relationship with them deepens at a new level. And it's not until you have those moments that you truly experience connection with other people. And so for all of that, I really, the conversation with Jan was really important and special to me, because I thought you really nailed that. That's what connection is honesty with the right person, with someone you trust.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he when we first meet him, he's very standoffish, isn't he? And then Layla is the first person who actually comes into his house, and so Hubert's made this house he's almost made it into a prison, really. And so Layla comes in, and they sort of, but because he's still got this secret, she's still a little bit further away from him. And so when we find out about David, she's coming a little bit closer, and then when we find out about Rose, that's finally she's right in there. There's no hiding anything from her. And once he can't hide from her, and I think it's the burglary really that kind of is the is what sets it all off. I think he's so heartbroken to have lost his wife's ring that that's him really sort of just saying, I can't even hold up this pretense anymore.
Right.
And that's him finally, I suppose, breaking open. But it's also, I suppose, the point at which he, you have to kind of sometimes you have to break down in order to kind of build yourself back up again.
Right.
And I think that's what we see with Hubert.
So Nicole wants to know, how did you come up with his name? Hubert Hezekiah Byrd.
There's a real tradition in the West Indies for just sweet lyrical names, and there's lots of biblical names as well. And so bizarrely, my mum went to Jamaica to see some family, and she took loads of photos, and she showed us the photos, and there was a relative there, and I said, "Oh, who's that?" And she said, "Oh, that's Herbert." And I just thought, you don't really hear the name Hubert or Herbert anymore, and I misheard her actually, and I said, "Oh, Hubert." She said, "Oh no, Herbert." But the name Hubert sort of stuck with me, and then I just joined it with Byrd because it just sounds so lyrical. Hubert Byrd, and Hubert Hezekiah Byrd just sounds like it wouldn't stand. It's definitely a sort of name of that era. In the West Indies, people had those sort of grand names.
You
And I suppose
really nailed it. You really nailed it with the name, because it was lyrical, it was lovable, it was I want to use the word old, but it had like a nice like age to the name. With just fit. It fit his personality. He was kind of crotchety, but deep inside he was kind and loving. And it was you really nailed the name. A lot of people are asking about how you came to make his relationship with the son, which I also I really loved. I mean, I really thought like it was hard. It was another hard thing that you revealed. Yeah. I love the way you revealed it, because it's sort of like you along you gave us pieces of why he was the crotchety old man that he was. And now we find out that his son had an addiction and is homeless in his own neighborhood. Yeah. So was there anything that came from?
I suppose I wanted David to be the opposite to Rose in a lot of ways. And it was, I suppose I wanted to kind of have a little bit of mystery. So we sort of see, we know from the past story that Hubert has 2 children, but in the front story, he only ever talks about the one for quite a while. And so that doesn't feel right. So that there's something going on there. And then I thought, I suppose I was thinking about, I wanted David, I suppose he's another source of pain for Hubert. And it's quite a complicated story, because lots of people have asked the question, well, what happened to David in the end? And it was a difficult one.
Lots of people are asking it in the comments here too.
And it was a difficult one, because I didn't want to make a complicated situation overly simple.
Yeah.
And it could have been so easy for me to have said, yes, David definitely turned around and gave up drugs and got himself together. Because it's, I didn't want it to be a fairy tale. But so when I was coming to the end, I thought, well, how am I going to resolve this story? And so when Hubert sees or thinks he sees David in the crowd, I just thought, there's a little indicator. So maybe it's David.
Right.
And maybe David hears his father talking about him, and maybe David can turn his life around. But I don't think it's going to be a thing where he and Hubert are going to be reunited or anything like that. And it was quite a sad one for me, because I thought, especially after they've fallen out, and I really felt for Hubert when he's looking after David, and you know, he does everything for him that he can, and even when David gets up and leaves, and he's bringing him food and he's bringing him clothing. And I thought it was really interesting when he draws the line when David doesn't come to Rosie's funeral, and I think that's where he draws the line. He says, right. you know, I can take anything, and he has taken anything, but he draws the line at him not attending Rosie's funeral, and I suppose there's a deep sadness there, and it's a complicated issue, and I knew that I didn't want to oversimplify it.
For whatever it's worth, I thought you did an excellent job addressing what, like you said, a complicated situation, and not oversimplifying it, and giving you that little glimpse at the end, like there is still hope, but yet there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of at the end of the day, only David can turn David's life around, not Hubert. And you said that, and it was just, there was the book. I really enjoyed it. It gave me enough through the Hubert's life and his pain that I experienced with him. You still gave me a breath of like a smile or something funny or a character. I just thank you for such a great story, and for pushing through and finishing. I can't imagine how difficult it is to complete one novel, much less 17. And for your 17th novel to be so touching and beautiful, it was just really great. So thank you.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thank you again for staying up so late with us.
I'm awake now.
You're gonna
carry on talking all night if you like. Yeah.
Well, again, I really appreciate you, and it was really nice to meet you. Hey, okay, 2 quick questions. If people want to follow you on Instagram, Mike Gayle.
Yes. So it's my handle's Mike Gayle the novelist. And so you'll just follow me, and you can see my face.
Great, and we can see what's coming next. Do you have something coming next?
So I'm working on a new novel that's hopefully coming out. It'll be out next summer in the UK, and it's currently called The Museum of Ordinary People.
That sounds amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And so, of your 17 books, this was my first of yours. If I was going to go back and read one, I mean, I might go back and read a lot of them, but which one would you say, start with this one, you'll love this one?
This one, it's called Half a World Away, and it's about
Half a World Away.
It's about two siblings two half siblings who were taken into care, and one gets adopted and one stays in the care system, and what happens when they meet up as adults. And if you thought that All the Lonely People was heartbreaking, you've got to read this. I mean, you've got to read this. You will absolutely love it. It's a no-brainer.
Done.
You will be,
done. I can't wait. Hey, thank you so much. It was really great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a great night. Well, guys, that was amazing. I always enjoy speaking with authors and getting to hear how they came to create such amazing characters and amazing stories. And I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mike. If you'd like more things like this, make sure you leave me a comment. Let me know what you're reading. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know when we're putting out more interviews with authors. And if you would like to join the Holly Furtick Book Club officially, all you have to do is go to hollyfurtick.com, give me your email address. All I'm going to do is send you an email reminder of what we're reading and when we're going to meet so that you can join us. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.